take care of New York Times first, because I don't say I feel stupid. I'm just wondering if I'm missing something. The New York Times article on Trump's tax returns, there's the whole question as to whether or not it was illegal to disclose that information via the New York Times. Now, a lot of people in my video breaking it down are saying, well, Viva, you missed it because Pentagon Papers answered this very question, the U.S. versus the New York Times, where the U.S. sued the New York Times to get a restraining order to prohibit the publication of what was classified documentation at the time. Nate, you want to start with?
Yeah, you know, go ahead, Bart.
Sorry, I was going to say one just brief thing on Pentagon Papers that they're misreading. That's a preliminary injunction prior restraint case.
Yeah.
So that's why the issue has never been fully resolved. This goes into the Assange case too, as to can you punish them after they publish? But all the New York Times case established is you cannot have prior restraint on publishing based on the fact that the information was confidential or secret or was otherwise private. They never resolved whether you could be sued for that. They never resolved whether you could be criminally indicted for that. The Julian Assange case will dictate that outcome.
There are a couple of things with the New York Times case. Number one, it's totally unethical for them to publish, you know, someone's tax returns, and you know, obviously it's to hell with that. They're going to do the public figure thing. So yeah, so that was wrong. That was 100% wrong. I don't care what anybody says. But the second thing is, I think it actually helped Trump in a multitude of different ways. And the first thing, number one, stop listening to the media and start listening to accountants, right? Because right after it came out, I started speaking to accountants, right? I know a guy from Forbes, and I have my own personal CPA. And I said, hey, what do you think about Trump's tax returns? Because I'm waiting to hear so I can do the video. He's going to jail. Oh, my God, this is the bomb. You know, there's Russia. So I'm like, yes, tell me. And the guy said, it's a nothing burger. And I'm like, why is it a nothing burger? So the first thing, one of the big issues that came out of it is that Trump paid more taxes to the government of Turkey than he did to the United States, right? Big story. Oh, my God, he's paid all these taxes to Turkey. But my accountant, the first thing he said was, that's everybody does that. The reason why is because when you're an American citizen, wherever you make money on the planet, the government taxes. So if you make money in China, Russia, wherever you make money, the government's going to tax. And the only way you don't pay taxes on that money is to claim it. So if you make money in Turkey, like Trump does, Trump has a multinational company, you make money in Turkey, you claim it on your taxes. So you can say, I've already paid tax in Turkey on it, and then you get a tax credit on here. So you'll see with any big multinational company, they'll a lot of times, like Amazon has paid no federal taxes, but they pay taxes every place else. You know, right. Nobody's making that mention. So the New York Times, what they did, they tried to make Trump's taxes into something that they were not. They tried to make it into this bomb that everyone's been waiting for. And it happened to be a nothing burger. What it did show, though, is Trump's, I can't say Trump, I'll say his accountants are geniuses at exploiting the tax code. Like, you know, and one thing a lot of people aren't going to tell you is that one of the big issues was that Trump got a $72 million refund from the government. And that was actually from Obama. Obama changed the rules in which if you have future earnings, and if you paid, let's say $100 million in taxes last year, but next year you actually lose $200 million on a deal. Well, you can actually get that money back that you paid the government 2 years ago. I forgot the name of the term, but it's a way that it works where you can actually get you can take future losses and charge them back to taxes that you already paid to get a rebate. That's all they did. And everybody was doing that because of the financial shutdown. And Obama changed it from 3 years to 5 years. So that 5-year change allowed Trump to go back that extra year where he paid all that money and get that money back. So there was nothing illegal in there. It made Trump look even more, it made him look like a better businessman than I think the New York Times tried to portray. And it's funny because if you guys listen to any competent CPA, they will tell you that those taxes were a nothing burger. And I'm sorry to say to my liberal friends, they just weren't. They weren't. And so everyone out there knows too, just one last piece. Yeah. The reason why they haven't published the source documents for any of those tax returns is because as soon as they publish the source documents, you'll know where they came from. If they came from his accountant, if they came from the bank, they came from the IRS, because they are all on those source documents. So they will not publish those source documents because you'll know their source. So that's the reason why no one can look at the back documents. You can only look at what they wrote up. And they wrote that piece up as a hit piece. That was a hit piece. and accountants, but again, accountants saw right through it. But you know, us people who are just going to read it will not. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
People don't appreciate the basic bottom lines of accounting. It's not even their fault. It's all complicated stuff. So you see, oh, he owes $421 million. He must be in bad shape. If he's got $2 billion worth of assets, you don't want to own $2 billion in assets free and clear. It serves no purpose when you could be reinvesting that money. But so the accounting side aside, I mean, I think most people, if anyone listens to a few accountants analyze that on YouTube, they'll see. But the question from the legal perspective, and going back to U.S. versus New York Times, in that decision, it was a question of prior restraint. But even in that context, that decision, nonetheless, even in that context, left open certain exceptions for the Espionage Act, as far as I understood, and other potential exceptions. So I didn't see it. I still don't see it as being determinate whatsoever on the issue. And I don't know also, it was talking about classified documents, but not specifically in the context of legislation that is passed to prohibit the act. So, I mean, I didn't know if I was missing something or if I wasn't.
Two things there. I don't think Trump could have won a prior restraint suit if he brought it, because since the New York Times case, the Pentagon Papers case, the courts have dramatically expanded prior restraint. This, by the way, is why gag orders are almost always unconstitutional. And courts try to force it on people without it ever being on paper. They scam it 100 different ways. They try to use generic and vague language and all that kind of thing. But prior restraint, for folks that maybe that terminology doesn't necessarily immediately resonate, it means preventing speech from occurring in the first place, as opposed to punishing speech after the fact, whether civilly or criminally. So prior restraint generally is considered almost always unconstitutional when the state does it. So I think that even though you could argue that the special provisions for tax code privacy, which in many respects are even stronger than what's in the Espionage Act because they're very specific, very broad. I mean, they even make it a crime for you to publish information that you receive illicitly if it's tax return information. Because it's, for people's background, the whole scam was this. It was, don't worry that we're ever using your tax returns for any reason other than assessing and collecting tax. And some of us voiced concerns, and people, my predecessors, voiced concerns saying this will just be used as an information gathering technique to have all kinds of intel on people and will be illicitly and impermissibly leaked or given to people or used for improper purposes. So that's where all the Section 6103 and its civil and criminal enforcement provisions in 7213 and other parts of Title 26 come from. It's, hey, don't worry, everybody. If anybody ever does this, we'll punish them harshly. Some of us have been saying I was a bunch of hogwash when it came down to it, but now I have my example. So that's the backdrop of that. I mean, I do mostly criminal and civil tax for the last 20 years. They talked to Business Insider about it. They talked to other people that I recommended they talk to, and they came to the same conclusion that Nate said. Everybody who looked at this saw this as a very general. For real estate developers out there, it's sort of like oil depreciation in the 80s and 90s when they were trying to build up the oil economy domestically. They give you tax incentives to do it. And the reason they give you tax, so it would be very rare for a real estate developer the size and scale of Trump to ever pay taxes during most of his business career, federal income taxes. That's going to be the exception, not the norm. And the reason for that is particularly in places like New York, Chicago, LA, California. They've imposed all kinds of restrictions on building. And the only way they could get anyone to actually do development on this is by giving them tax incentives. Trump actually testified on this way back in the 80s before Congress, when in 86 they took out a tax reform bill that basically made that very difficult. He came in and said, look, you've just, because what happens is these are 25-year deals usually with the bank. So they are relying upon the tax credits and the tax deductions to make the deal profitable, which also secures repayment to the bank. So when they went in 86 and made these changes, they jeopardized the entire high-end real estate industry in the United States. So Congress went back and said, okay, sorry, we'll fix this. And they did. So that's where this comes from. This is primarily, Trump gets the benefit from it because he chose to go into real estate development, that in high-end real estate development and in high-regulated states. He profits from this in the tax benefits. But for folks out there, a lot of this real estate development would cease altogether if those tax developments didn't exist. The profit comes from the tax developments, particularly in highly regulated business structures. So, I mean, developers hate building in California, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the number of restrictions and limitations. People can see George Gammon's video on this, too, who's built just basic homes all over the place and all the crazy problems he ran into. And he tried to just build a basic home on a lot in Portland, Oregon. you know, he had to tar tar and pave the street. He had to do. I was like, what the heck? So what all those, if people like on the left like those regulations, you need to like the tax code provisions, because the only reason why people still do abide by those regulations, which are environmentally sensitive and community oriented and whatnot, is because they have the tax benefits that create the profitability. But Trump it's a very traditional return of a real big real estate developer. Trump faces zero criminal exposure, because in the criminal tax arena, you have a good faith and reliance defense. So if accountants did your return, tax lawyers did your return, you can't be criminally prosecuted, period. People were comparing this to my Snipes case, saying, well, hey, Snipes had this. There were other issues in the Snipes case. So it wasn't quite.
One thing I've been seeing a lot too on the interwebs is the fact that he got these huge tax credits, like he's writing off all this stuff, the depreciation. And I think a lot of people just don't understand, without businesses being able to write off losses, our economy would be destroyed overnight. And the reason why, we'll take a pharmaceutical company, for instance. They put $20 million into developing a new drug. Now, that drug may hit or may not. But just imagine if they had to pay tax on that $20 million loss. They would not be able to create new drugs, right? Because now you're losing money and you're paying tax on lost money. So that's why the government allows you to take this as a deduction. So businesses can take risks, because what we want to do is we want to incentivize the private market, and we want to let people know that it's okay to do risk, and that you're not going to be double hit on taxes if you take that risk. And that's the way our economy survives. So the fact that businesses write off things that they use and their losses is something that it's one of the cornerstones to our economy. And I think more people need to understand that, instead of just saying, well, he wrote off all this money. Yeah, but he's got 20 buildings in New York. He's housing millions of, that's the reason why the government allows this thing to happen. Sorry about that.
You're on mute.
Viva, you're mute. You look good talking now.
Yeah. I had to cough and I didn't want to go into the mic. I was going to bring up the pharmaceutical, what's the word? Research and R&D credits. But, and on that vein, just want to make sure everybody appreciates this as well. The U.S. is one of the, I don't know how many countries are out there, but it's one of the countries that taxes you, like you said, Nate, earlier, on your income throughout the world. And so it's not obscene to be paying taxes to a foreign country and then claiming it as a credit when you come back and say, well, I already pay. Happens in Canada as well. Like if you make money in the States, you pay tax on that in the States. You don't want to pay tax on it in Canada again. So it's just, people don't even understand that, or they don't even appreciate that factual element. And they say, oh, it's paying money to Turkey. There must be some Russia-Turkey connection. And that's what the New York Times wanted people to take away from that.
And the other thing,
article.
For folks out there, there's two other constitutional constraints on taxation. One is tax treaties. So sometimes you'll see reference to double Dutch, double Irish. This is why I represented one of the high-end tax accountants in the country that help people structure all kinds of things in ways that were completely legal using tax treaties. The tax treaties are things the IRS can't change, because like treaties are the superior law of the land, that the treaty itself has to change. And so tax treaties have a unique influence on limiting the IRS's ability to even claim some taxes due. And often the tax treaty has provisions that if you pay tax to that country, you can't basically constitutionally have to pay tax here because of the tax treaty between the United States and that country. The second component is the 16th Amendment was interpreted by the Supreme Court as limiting the definition of income to the way they defined the dissenting judge defined it in the 1890s. What that means is you can't tax constitutionally property in America. You could only tax gains severed from the property. And so sometimes net operating losses that Nate was talking about, bad debts, other things, sometimes this is constitutionally required, because at some point, if you're taxing people when they're losing money, you're taxing their property. You're not taxing their income under the 16th Amendment's definition by the Supreme Court.
It's amazing. I'm just bringing up some super chats, but someone had said it's time for us to move on to Sullivan if we only have 25, 30 minutes left.
Uh-oh.
So and let's just summarize this. We'll end it with the bookshelf. What are they called? The book ends. The New York Times Pentagon Papers related to prior restraint, which was a prohibition on the publication, and it did not specifically address or even definitively address the consequences of potentially criminal publication. Just said, you can do it. We can't stop you from doing it under certain circumstances, without going into the potential sanctions for if you do it and take your chances. So I'm glad I didn't screw that up. I thought I understood. I just didn't want to get into the decision itself in the vlog because I don't think I understand the nuances well enough to do it. That's a good one. Okay, now
Viva, can you share my screen real quick? That if you look at the bottom, you see the screen. That sums it up.